Hello, my fellow degenerates. I'm back, and it didn't even take me 3 years. So, as I said last time, before we moved to season 2, there were some things that were either not explained very well or cut from the anime entirely that become plot relevant as we move forward. So that's what I plan on doing, explaining those points. And I even have a neat little list here. And sure, it's a little long, but things always change when adapting mediums.
それは最初の3話分だけです。
Excuse you? What do you mean only 3 episodes? Oh, sweet Haruhi, save this sinner's soul.
マジかよ、2026年にもなって、春日のネタが出てくるなんて。
探し日々に笑えなくなっていた僕の目に映る君は綺麗だ明けない夜にこぼれた涙も君の笑顔に溶けてく
Fuck it, let's get it twisted. Now then, I've been racking my brain on the best way to go about this for a while now, when it hit me. This isn't some introspective dissertation or high-minded philosophical debate. This is just a guy on the internet talking about an edgelord isekai. So I decided the unfiltered route, only going over the things cut from the anime with no real rhyme or reason. So from the beginning, after coming through the world of Tortoise, students are given a status plate. What do these plates represent? Level, class, and skills. So let's start with a basic explanation of these. I'm sorry, my dudes, this is going to be a slog. I'm just not that good yet. So, starting with how leveling works. Unlike what the name implies, leveling doesn't work like in games. Your level is more a representation of potential growth, with 1 being 1% of your full potential and 100 being 100% of your full potential. And this, in practice, means you raising your stats increase your level instead of the other way around. As for your stats, they break down into 6 categories: strength, vitality, defense, agility, magic, and magic defense. The more a person trains and fights, the more advanced stats they can acquire.
体一つでジャングルを生き抜いたり、死と隣り合わせのテストを繰り返して精神を鍛えます。
The maximum level a normal person can reach in their life is 100, and the highest stats that can normally be achieved are around 10,000, though not too many people are able to achieve this, with magic being the only one that needs a deeper explanation. Jobs is a term used to define the natural aptitude of a person in Tortoise. Jobs are directly linked to the type of skills a person can know or learn, although people without a job can still obtain skills, but are typically not as abundant. All jobs were classifications made by the Holy Church, so the only time new jobs were added to the list of known jobs was when someone accomplished great deeds in a new field that didn't already have a job assigned to it. Jobs are split into 2 disciplines: combat and non-combat. Combat jobs being exceedingly rare, while non-combat jobs being relatively ordinary. And so that leads into skills. Skills are the abilities that a person in Tortoise knows, learns, or possesses depending on the job they have, as skills are directly linked to them. Skills can also be considered a hidden talent, which helps boost the power and abilities of a person. Skills that either a person or a race is naturally attuned to without the need to train for them is often referred to as a special magic. A normal person who possesses a job usually knows or learns around 2 or 3 skills at maximum in their lifetime. It is also possible for a person to never gain access to some of their skills because the right conditions for them to bloom or be accessed haven't appeared before them. However, if a person goes through arduous training, they may be able to unlock more of their hidden skills. While it's extremely rare to gain a new skill, it is easily possible to learn or gain a derivative skill, which, as the name suggests, are skills which are derivatives of the original skill. These derivative skills could either be a powered up version of the original skill or might be an alternate type with a different function, but works similarly to the original skill. A derivative skill can be gained from practice, increased experience, or heightened emotions. In addition, some skills can only be attained as derivative skills, such as different types of appraisal match. There are some skills which are extremely unique in characteristics and have the ability to affect the overall abilities of a person. The skill mana manipulation allows a person to directly control mana and allows them to either activate or use spells without the need of an incantation or magic circle, for example. There are also skills which help increase the affinity of certain aspects for a person to allow them an easier access to use. For example, if a person has an elemental affinity, that person can utilize a spell of that element with more efficiency, power, and is able to cast them at a much faster rate. There are several skills that are unique to certain races. For example, the skill Blood Conversion is one that is only accessible to vampires, and the skill Dragonification is one that is only accessible to dragonmen. In addition, some skills are only accessible for people with a special job, such as the skill Limit Break, which is normally only available for a person with a hero job. And so finally, let's talk about magic.
純粋に手数でこの私が干されている
What am I doing with my life? What am I doing with my life? What am I doing with... Like magic in general, it is divided into various basic elements as followed: light, dark, earth, fire, water, ice, wind, and lightning. Many types of magic spells fall under one of the elemental categories, like both barrier, recovery, and binding magic spells falling under the light element. Each spell is graded to a level depending on their base power, strength, and usage difficulty. The greatest spells are as follows: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Aptitude with magic or spells can differ between people, either because they were born with it or because they belong to particular races. Aptitude with magic can also help someone to either learn a spell or focus more power more easily into a spell. In general, humans as a race have average aptitude toward magic and spells, while demons have a high aptitude towards spells, and the beastmen and demi-humans have almost no aptitude towards magic. Dragonmen being a race which is more close to a monster, having high aptitude towards magic and spells, and vampires have the highest aptitude towards magic and spells. What am I doing with my life? Now then, the actual mechanics of it all. In order to be able to use magic, a person must first possess mana in their body, and then channel that mana into a magic circle, which has a spell inscribed within it, with the help of an incantation, and then cast the spell. There is no limit as to what type or kind of spell a person can use. An incantation is a chant which helps channel the mana of a person, and the length of an incantation is directly proportional to how much mana one could pour into the magic circle. So the effectiveness of a spell is directly proportional to the amount of mana used to cast it. What am I doing with my life? As for the magic circle, the more complicated a spell is, the larger its area of effect, the more inscriptions needed to be added to the magic circle, making it quite large in many cases. So even a basic spell like Fireball might need an intricate magic circle which could span over 10 centimeters in diameter. Since the magic circle has to contain the inscription for the element, strength, range, span, mana requirement, and maintain duration, magic circles are generally of two different styles. The most common method is to inscribe it into a special kind of disposable paper, which, while it allows for many different variations of spell usage, has a limit of one time only. The other method is to carve the inscription for the magic circle on various kinds of special minerals, which, while bulky and limited in spells they can cast, are reusable and are far more powerful in general. However, all the requirements of casting a spell can be ignored, or at the very least reduce the length of the magic circle and incantation, depending on the skills of magical affinities that a person possesses. Magical affinities allow a person to apply various effects depending on their affinity to a spell without it losing either power or strength. If a person possesses elemental affinity, for example, they can ignore the need to add the inscription of the element into the magic circle, thus shortening its size. Instead, they have to imagine the form of the element while chanting the spell, and are able to add the element into the spells that way. Possessing magical affinity to an element also increases the base strength and power of the spell, depending on the additional skills and derivative skills a person might possess. Some affinities might also increase the efficiency of usage, decreasing the mana consumption, and can also affect the cast time of the spell. As most people who possess mana have some form of magic affinity, so in general, people can cast a spell with a magic circle of less than 10 centimeters in diameter. Though, for a person with no magical affinity whatsoever, even a basic spell like Fireball would need a magic circle over 2 meters in diameter because of the additional inscriptions needed to make up for the lack of magical affinity, which includes the trajectory, speed, and even the conclusion, thus making the spell practically useless. But skills like mana manipulation or image composition can remove the requirements of needing an incantation or magic circle completely, as mana manipulation allows a person to directly manipulate their own mana, thus removing the need for an incantation, while image composition allows the users to create an imaginary magic circle in their mind in place of a physical one, thus removing the need. Even so, without the right magical affinities, a person with these skills would still need a large circle to invoke spells. Each spell contains a core that dictates how it activates and the effect it attempts to effect on the world. It is also what links the spell and the magic circle for the circle to continue directing the spell after it's invoked. What am I doing? What am I doing? I am not doing that again. If you did not understand, I am sorry, but fuck you. And with that long-winded explanation done, you understand more why Hajime was devastated that not only were his stats low, but because of his low magic, growing at all would be that much harder. To the point that after 2 weeks of harsh training, his stats went from 10 in every category to 12, while Kalki's went from 100 to 200 at the same amount of time. After learning about his weaknesses, Hajime spends most of his time while not training in the library, studying the world of Tortoise. It's here we learn about Beastmen, one of the 3 primary races of Tortoise. It is a collective term for various non-human races that possess human-like characteristics, but beastmen are a whole conversation in and of itself, so let's hold off on that little landmine. Now that we're all on the same page about the systems at play, let's go from volume to volume talking about the changes. Volume 1. From Volume 1, we see Hajime being tormented by Daisuke and his friends, which leads to Kalki lecturing him, so this is as good a time as any to dive into the hero's party. Let's start with Kalki, the hero. Kalki is charismatic, kind, and driven by a strong sense of justice, often seen as perfect hero due to his handsome appearance, but his real problem is his deeply flawed nature that equates majority opinion with righteousness, and that everyone is good. This simplistic worldview, reinforced by untested success on Earth, fosters Kalki's belief in his own infallibility, making him dismissive of others' perspective and prone to blaming others, particularly Hajime, for his shortcomings, to the point he blamed Hajime for being bullied without thinking for a second Daisuke might be in the wrong. His arrogance manifests in his refusal to heed warnings from friends like Shizuka, instead clinging to his delusional sense of self-righteousness that blinds him to reality. Then there's Shizuka the Swordmaster. Shizuka's most notable trait is her loyalty towards her friends or people she finds interesting. She stayed as Kalki's childhood friend despite her desire to cut ties with him for the sake of avoiding the bullying of other girls that were in love with him. She also would try to steer him in the right path when his habit of interpreting things to his own convenience will lead him astray. In the case of Kaori, she always tried to help her, whether it was protecting her or helping her in her pursuits of Hajime's feelings. She even attempted to help Hajime when their classmate would try to bully him and scorn him, as she sympathized with his situation due to her being in a similar situation in the past. And finally, Rotaro the monk. Rotaro is your typical energetic muscle-brained person. He values hard work and tends to be rash in his actions. While he's not as dense as Koki, Rotaro is still pretty slow when it comes to understanding a woman's feelings. He is extremely loyal to his friends, especially Koki. He is always the first to stand by his best friend whenever he decides to do something, no matter how crazy it is. This makes him the opposite of Shizuka, who always tries to get Kalki to think before he decides to do something reckless, but will still support him. He will also be the first person to defend his friends, both verbally and physically, which leads to the most important member for the story, Kaori, the healer. Kaori has an immense kindness, and with an extremely friendly and caring personality, combined with her beauty, a strong sense of responsibility, and her tendencies to look after others, makes her immensely popular with her classmates. Kaori cares deeply about her friends, but the people she cares most about are Hajime, for reasons to be explained, and Shizuka, her best friend. She also has a strong will that allows her to overcome all obstacles. Kaori is often told she is an airhead and a troublemaker. She tends to say and do embarrassing things without thinking about her surroundings. This has always caused both Shizuka and Hajime a lot of trouble in the past because she has failed to realize the attention she was getting. She has always been unaware of the fact that many boys around her have feelings for her and have broken many of their hearts without noticing due to her already existing romantic feelings for Hajime ever since middle school. Which leads into the next point, to one of the more important parts the anime briefs through. Hajime's meeting with Kaori in his room is much longer in the light novel, and she tells him about the first time she saw him, prostrating himself in front of a bunch of delinquents. He didn't even stop when they spat on him, poured juice on him, or even stepped on him, and eventually they gave up and left, going on to tell him it's easy for strong people to solve things with violence. People like Kalki can easily fling themselves into trouble and just fight their way out. But few people who are weak have the courage to stand up for others, and even fewer could bow down like that for someone else, saying she was always scared back then and always made excuses for not helping other people by telling herself things like, I'm not strong, like Shizuka. So when she got in trouble, she always waited for other people to come and save her. Very emotional. Oh yeah, someone's also over there in the shadows watching now. But now then, to the Great Orgus Labyrinth. The thought of going line by line over the skills and stats increases fills me with an existential dread, mostly because I'm doing this completely alone and going line by line would take me forever. So I'll just tell you to go to Any News on YouTube. He does a better job than I could ever do, though I will go over 2 or 3 events that make certain actions make more sense. First, when the class is first fighting the monsters, in the light novel, there is a scene where Hajime lures monsters into a pit trap and kills them, impressing the night bodyguards, improving his resourcefulness and ability to think calmly in stressful situations. Second, in a fight, Kalki used a powerful spell destroying the walls, which revealed the trap that teleported them to the 65th floor, proving how much of a dumbass he is for firing an AoE spell in a confined space. This one particularly bothers me because in the anime, he uses the attack to save Hajime, who was being attacked by a small fry, which he never did, making Hajime look like a coward. Why does this matter? Because the next scene. Lastly, when they're first transported to the 65th floor, Kalki starts fighting the behemoth without thinking about the Trom soldiers attacking from behind. This does 2 things, forcing Shizuka, Rotaro, and Kaori to support him since he's outmatched, and the other students behind them starting to panic. It's not until Hajime offered to hold the behemoth back and forces Kalki to lead the other students against the Trom. And like I said, those 3 scenes make a world of difference. For one, in the anime, if he was cowering against something on the 20th floor, why would he suddenly be able to go after the behemoth? It also made Kalki look like a good guy, which he very much isn't, but I'm starting to rant, so back on topic. The only other part that relates to this are the students coming to the justification that the stray magic that hit Hajime was an accident, because they didn't want to think that they were the ones that killed him. The only other things from volume 1 that I should probably talk about are 2 characters that were, for better or worse, cut out of the first season entirely in a couple of scenes. So let's start with the royal family. Liliana is the princess of the Hylia kingdom, and while I can read a detailed wiki article about her, all she really does in the first couple of volumes is be friends with Kaori and Shizuka and crush on Kalki, cause why not? She also has a younger brother, Lundo, a crown prince of the Hylia kingdom.
他に何か
He also has a crush on Kaori, and that's it for the royal family. Maybe they were cut out for a good reason. But I'm starting to do that thinking thing again, so let's get back to it. And then there's Gahald Holscher. Many times throughout the first volume, the Holscher Empire is referenced with the main point being that they believe might make right, and you can do whatever you want as long as you're stronger. And in a chapter, an unknown Koki fights their emperor, Gahad, and gets beat, with Gahad coming away from the fight thinking Koki is worthless. And finally, it actually reveals almost immediately that Daisuke was the one that tried to kill Hajime. What was left out is that someone else figured figured it out and started blackmailing him to do, well, something. We're not fully aware yet. Now, moving on to Volume 2. Everything. Everything was cut. Moving on to Volume 3. Okay. I'll try and summarize the differences, but fuck my life sideways. So, from the top, let's finally step on that landmine from earlier and get into the Beastmen. Beastmen were generally seen as inferior by most other beings due to their inability to use magic, and were often persecuted for it. As a result of the harsh treatment, most of them lived in the Sea of Trees, which was surrounded by a fog barrier that made it impossible for most beings to navigate. As a result, it protected them from being attacked from other races. They had even established a nation called Verbergen for all of them to coexist. Despite this, there are those who prey on beastmen and hunt them, such as Holster's Empire, which hunts down beastmen to turn into slaves. Hey Hajime, mind giving a guy some catharsis? The differences between beastmen and humans may be obvious, such as a tail on animal ears, or inconspicuous, such as pointed ears. One common trait among all beastmen is that they generally incapable of using magic due to their inability to wield mana. And to round it all up, beastmen have varying lifespans, with some races such as rabbit men being comparable to humans, while others such as elves can live for centuries. Way to turn a trope on its head. Elf that can't use magic. After rescuing Chie and her tribe from the monsters in the Raisin Gorge, while taking them home, one of the more important things happens. They're approached by a group of soldiers from the Holster Empire that are on a slave hunt, and Hajime kills them without mercy. Afterward, thinking to himself, this was the first time he killed a human, and that he didn't really feel anything, and solidifying his transformation into a monster. This also scares Chie and her tribe, to which Yue berates them, only strengthening that unhealthy bond I told you about earlier. From there, like in the anime, if not incredibly rushed, the duo took them back to the Sea of Trees, met with the elders of Verbergen, trained Chie's tribe, and learned they can't go into the labyrinth until they clear 3 other labyrinths. From there, we move on to Brooktown. When Hajime, Yue, and Chie visit Brooktown for the first time, the 3 quickly make a name for themselves among the citizens, with Hajime and Yue particularly having earned the nickname Love Smashers, since Yue had a habit of castrating any asshole that didn't understand consent. And because I don't feel like repeating myself constantly, can we all just assume every time Hajime and whatever girl he happens to be with enters a town, some asshole demands insert girl's name and is swiftly beaten half to death, then castrated, creating an army of pretty prisoners. Problematic character tropes aside, Hajime registers as an adventurer, takes on official requests, and deals with localized corruption. Just something to keep in mind. Oh yeah, at some point, he bought Chie a fake slave collar to attempt to curb some of the harassment, but I mean, kind of feel like still fighting with the dude castrating a bunch of people, kind of deserve it. We also cut back to Kaori more or less mastering image composition along with other forms of magic, making her the strongest member in Kaoki's party. Kaori and Shizuka are also bestest friends. I should also introduce the rest of Kaoki's party. There's Suzu, the barrier master. Suzu is the mood maker of her class, as she is usually very cheery and likes to lighten up the mood. She also acts perverted at times toward her friends, making dirty jokes or grabbing one of her friends' breasts on occasion. You know, the dirty old man as a young high school girl trope. However, she's actually quite pure. Eri is kind and compassionate to others, especially to her classmates of whom she considers to be her friends, but due to her looks and shy personality, she will be timid when interacting with them. Everything else more or less plays out like the anime, so we move on to Volume 3.
臆病者
To be fair, most things from this point does go the way the anime showed it, if not stupidly condensed and montaged to hell. In the light novel, Hajime's party doesn't just magically appear in the town of They register at the Adventurers Guild in Furin and accepts a formal request to escort a group of merchants and other adventurers to The anime skips over this entirely, removing scenes where Hajime interacts with local rank-and-file adventurers and merchants, threatening a merchant that alludes to kidnapping Chie and Yue and stealing his storage ring. From there, he learns the trick about dragons' only unarmored areas, so that scene doesn't come out of nowhere. From there, he's given the job by the Adventurers Guild and meets Aiko, and since the whole prologue was dedicated to her, info dump time. So let's talk about Aiko. Aiko Hatayama, 25 years old, high school teacher. For her, being a teacher wasn't just about teaching a subject to her students and making sure they kept their grades and appearances up. Of course, those things were important as well, but what Aiko valued more than anything was being there for her students. More importantly, that meant she wanted to be the person outside their families that her students could rely on whenever they were in trouble. This resolve first began during an incident in her own high school days, but that was a tale for another time. Regardless, it was both her creed and her pride to be the person her students could rely on. If she couldn't uphold that simple principle, then she felt she had no right to call herself a teacher. Because of this, when Hajime explains the truth about Ihe, the novel frames it as a shattering, terrifying revelation that completely alters Aiko's worldview. She is forced to realize that the religion she has been serving treats her students like disposable toys. The anime breezes through this though. The only other part that needs mentioning is Tio's backstory in the extra chapters. After the destruction of the Dragon Man Kingdom, as well as the death of both her parents, Tio inherited her father's will and mission to defeat the pseudo-god Ihe. She trained herself to the point of surpassing her grandfather, who was known as the strongest dragon man in her village. It is because of her mission that she swore to never take a spouse that was weaker than her, and why she wanted to investigate the otherworld summoning, hoping that they would have someone strong enough to beat Ihe. And if I'm allowed just a short rant, it makes complete sense why these three are willing to start a harem with Hajime. For Yue, it was an unhealthy coping mechanism caused by her trauma, and it's one that they're continuing to heal from. For Tio, Hajime was the only one capable of helping defeat Ihe, the person that killed her family. But she is the most interesting if you ask me. Because while she loves Hajime, she loves Yue just as much and wants to be with both of them because they're the only ones like her and can directly manipulate mana, making her feel like less of a freak that got her family killed. But all that to say, they're a found family that just so happens to be willing to kill a god if he tries them. But I love One Piece. And my captain would declare war on them motherfucker for a fucking rice ball. So no hate, my dudes. No hate. For the love of all that is good and holy, why did I choose this one to be my first try at this bitch?
撮影中です。
So, let's begin with the unimportant parts. After saving and returning Will to his parents, Hajime acts respectful, making Shie and Tio delusional about it. The foreign guild master gives Yue, Shie, and Tio status plates, and after looking at them, realizes they're abnormal and heretical that the church wouldn't allow. He also gives Hajime the ability to hide his status so he seems only slightly OP. Next, the battle with Catalea. In the anime, it was a relatively quick thing, but in the light novel, she was hunting Kalki's parties for days through the labyrinth. Tio and Miyu was now supposed to accompany Hajime in the dungeon. They were left behind by Hajime for safety, fatherly. Excuse me, I fucked up when I said fatherly purpose. From there, all that really changes is the fight scenes are different. Yue uses this spell instead of that spell. Shizuka gets the sword then instead of now while threatening to spread a bunch of Chunibyo names if he doesn't take care of Kaori, showcasing Shizuka's unique dynamic with Hajime. I think my favorite is Disaster of Disasters, Reverse Calamity. Perfect. Mainly, there are only three major changes. Meld apologizes to Koki, telling him he wanted to get Koki to kill some bandits, knowing his morals were too high for a war. Koki does the whole hero stick to Yue, Shie, and Tio, calling out Shio's slave collar, to which Hajime drops him in a hole with a flashbang and a stun grenade. Cause really, that's what growth looks like when your previous method was upping a railgun to a fucker's head. And last but not least, the light novel's epilogue, which features a terrifying glimpse into the rising madness of Hayama and a setup for the creeping silver malice of the true antagonist. Finally, with that done, all that's left is go through the next 2 seasons. Luckily, there wasn't nearly as much skipped in those 2, right? Right? Until then, remember, delete your search history, my fellow degenerates.